Okay, hope the audio works. We are live on the Tone Vase YouTube channel as well. I am at Parallelly Police, the home of Hackers Congress. And I just completed my presentation, which was not live streamed to my channel. It's still a work in progress. You guys will get it soon. And now it's time for some Q&A. And I think we have the mic, so you guys should be able to hear the questions, but I'll try and summarize the question as well. All right, here we go.
Hi there. Thanks for the presentation. I understand like in a limited time, there isn't really like time to get into like too much details. But I have two questions. One would be regarding a general like immutability. Like you mentioned that a case with the DAO proves that the Ethereum blockchain is immutable. Well, like, would you also say that applies to like other blockchains in general, or do you think that's the specific case for Ethereum because of the DAO hack?
I think it applies to almost all of the blockchains. Besides, I mean, Ethereum just showed it to you first, basically, right? I don't think any of the other blockchains are really that immutable, right? Like some of them have been immutable up to this point, like Litecoin, like Monero. I haven't heard of any incidents where they haven't really been immutable, but Bcash showed you that it's not immutable, right? I mean, recently they had two mining pools got together and reversed transactions. In addition, after the Bcash hard fork to BSV and BCH, the Bcash team put in checkpoints. Again, shows you that it's not really immutable. So over time, I'm expecting more and more of all of these blockchains to prove why they're not immutable. And the other problem here is the 51% attack. The 51% attack is very expensive in Bitcoin, a lot cheaper in altcoins, but it's more than that, right? There's another component besides the cost of a 51% attack. There's really no financial benefit in 51% attacking Bitcoin because you can't exit with a profit. But you can exit with a profit by 51% attacking an altcoin, because you can always go up another level to move whatever you stole to a more secure blockchain, right? So the DAO hacker hacked Ethereum, and if he pulls that Ethereum out and sells it for Bitcoin, he got the money, right? I don't think he did that fast enough. Maybe the anonymity wasn't there, right? But the point is, I think every single altcoin is very heavily vulnerable to that 51% attack because you can profit from it. You can't really profit from 51% attacking Bitcoin because not only will you crash the Bitcoin network, all the lesser ones are going to say, well, if Bitcoin can be 51% attacked, what does that mean for my less secure one, right? That's another reason why nobody would do it. Only governments would have an incentive to 51% attack Bitcoin because then you can destroy every single blockchain. So that's the other side of the immutability view as to why I don't consider the other blockchains all that immutable. And when you look at something like Dan Larimer's stuff, like all of his delegated proof of stake delegated to 21 people, right? So 21 people decide Steemit's immutability. 21 people decide every transaction in EOS its immutability. And I'm pretty sure BitShares is the same way, right? He has this thing for 21. So when you have 21 nodes, basically, 21 people deciding in EOS, I mean, if they don't have a weekly phone call between 21 of them, I would be surprised, like a board meeting, right? If something needs to get done, it will get done.
the second question, if I may, is like related also to forking or like kind of future progress of the Bitcoin network. What do you think the reasons are for the Bitcoin network to be, or like Bitcoin Core to be sort of like immune against like future hard forks that could influence like monetary supply? Yeah.
Sure. So I don't. Bitcoin has never actually had a hard fork. There's been a couple of incidents. There was an incident in, I believe, early 2011, where like 1 billion Bitcoin was created, and people thought it would need a hard fork to fix, but they found a way to do it with a soft fork. Then it was an incident in 2013 where the Bitcoin network started to split because of a bug. Mike Hearn's work, but and that was also fixed. That one was challenging. I mean, miners had to be called and explained what happened, and some miners had to lose some profit. But that was also fixed with a soft fork. Now, Segwit was getting in with a soft fork. Some people disagreed, created a side coin. I don't see hard forks happening unless not doing a hard fork basically destroys Bitcoin. So it has to be a really catastrophic bug, like a bug that is worse than somebody exploiting it and creating it 1 billion Bitcoin, because even that was fixed with a soft fork. Because you are dealing with some of the smartest programmers in the world, right? And occasionally they will, miss something, like what happened with the potential inflation bug that was there last year, and something was missed in the code, and then someone discovered it. Wait a minute, you could have potential for a problem, and you're like, yes, but exploiting it won't really get you anywhere, because A, you'll crash the network, and B, it was actually very difficult to achieve. I don't see hard forks unless it's like, wow, I mean, this was the fear with like quantum computers, which I don't really have anymore, but it's like, wow, we have a powerful computer that can like guess passwords to private keys, and now people's Bitcoins can be stolen. And the only way that could be fixed is with a hard fork for better encryption. That could be a hard fork that everyone is incentivized to do, or the system dies. If it's a hard fork that doesn't endanger the entire system, it's never going to happen. Whoever wants to do it will just create an altcoin, like what happened with Bcash. So I'm not expecting that. Let's be happy that we can still get soft forks in. I think Segwit was like the last major soft fork. The next soft fork is going to be Schnorr signatures, bulletproofs. Again, they try to put a bunch of things in it so that most things get done. That could be the last really major soft fork, because in the future, even a soft fork could be challenging, because Bitcoin will be too big. It'll be too valuable. It'll be trillions of dollars. And what if that soft fork has a bug? It's not worth it anymore, right? Like, it's not worth it to endanger your life savings. So let's hope we can get 3 or 4 good soft forks in there, before 2025, maybe 2030, and after that, like, the changes will be so minuscule that they won't matter. Now, the reason why Schnorr really needs to be there is I'm not a developer, so I can't tell you the exact details. But the Schnorr signatures, they're way more efficient. They provide privacy, they provide scalability. And Schnorr signatures existed when Satoshi was creating Bitcoin. The reason he didn't use it is because it was under copyright. The copyright's gone. So the common question is, well, who cares? Satoshi was anonymous. Who cares if some of the code of Bitcoin had copyrighted material? I think it would have been very dangerous, because if there was copyrighted material in the early days of Bitcoin, that means every early miner would have technically been breaking the law. And that would have potentially given the green light to governments to go after miners. And that could have endangered Bitcoin in the very early days when it was still fragile. And another reason why Bitcoin is hard to replace is, how do you replicate the first year of Bitcoin's existence when it was literally worthless? All these other alternatives, you know, there's already hype about how much money you're going to make from them before they're even launched. And that's why they just can't have the same decentralized nature as Bitcoin. Right, question right there.
Okay,
Hi, thanks for the presentation. It was very, very cool. So I got a question, which is, you already touched on that topic during the presentation. It's the speed of development of Bitcoin. I'm gonna give you an analogy from the world of business, basically, and you can see many of the incumbent firms and many of the newcomer firms basically compete about market share, which can be translated to the world of blockchains. And how do you, if you could elaborate more on how the blockchain ecosystem, Bitcoin ecosystem is going to kind of defend against these newcomers who can basically afford to move fast and break things when Bitcoin is slowly getting in a state, which you just mentioned, that it might not be able to afford to do that?
Well, it's very simple. Bitcoin just needs to prove that it's immutable. That's all that matters, right? Immutability. It's immutable, it stays decentralized, it's trustless, and that's what gives it value. Now, slowly, everything else will just falter. And the reality is, most things don't need decentralization. Decentralization is very slow. Decentralization is very expensive. And since Bitcoin, everyone's been trying to decentralize everything, and they're slowly realizing that it doesn't work. Oh, just in case on the live stream, the question didn't come out. It was, how does Bitcoin compete with its competitors, so to speak, that can move fast and break things? Because they can break things, right? Bitcoin's value is security. And slowly but surely, if there is anything out there that does need decentralization, it'll eventually be able to migrate to Bitcoin. Bitcoin core developers had absolutely zero interest in what Ethereum was doing. But now, within the next year, almost anything on Ethereum could be built on the Bitcoin liquid sidechain. You can build your ICOs there if you want to. No one really does them anymore because people realize that you can't, that it's just pump and dump schemes. And but you can do it. So if there is another need, it will be built on Bitcoin for that Bitcoin security. So it doesn't really need to move and compete with them. Same thing, Monero came out. It's like, oh, we're anonymous transactions. Sure, well, Bitcoin will be anonymous eventually when it needs to be, right? Right now, scalability is a little more important because the Bitcoin blockchain was spammed in 2017, making it look slow, making it look expensive. And scalability became slightly a higher priority than fungibility. The reason why fungibility and anonymity on Bitcoin is not that critical at the moment is because law enforcement in the major countries like Europe, like US, like Australia, they have not yet gone after and started arresting people for using Bitcoin unless it was for actual criminal activities. Now, we can debate whether drugs are criminal or not. It depends on your country's jurisdiction, right? But it's criminal to them, right? So until the government starts going after people that are using Bitcoin for non-illicit purposes, anonymity and fungibility is not a huge priority. It's still a priority, and it will be fixed, but it's not that critical to the survival of the system. But once you see people start getting arrested just for using Bitcoin, anonymity is going to come in real quick, okay? Because then it suddenly becomes a higher priority. there's only so much code review you can do. There's only so many developers that can program good things. So it'll all happen. And in this case, because you're dealing with people's life savings, and it's not that easy. People are like, oh, another coin will overtake Bitcoin. No, no, no. It's not like moving your social media profile from MySpace to Facebook. You know, we are talking your savings here, right? And some of us will never move. The early Bitcoin adopters, most of them will never switch. Like, I know I wouldn't. And imagine the reality, right? If another altcoin takes over Bitcoin, that means that altcoin can also be taken over. So the store of value property is just gone. All of these cryptos will be transactional currencies. To me, the less valuable your currency, the more velocity it has. Like if someone paid you in Venezuelan bolivars, you will immediately try to convert it to something else. And that's the crazy argument that Bcash people have, that your currency used to be more and more used. I'm like, well, sure, go to Zimbabwe. You know, like their currency gets used a lot, right? The moment you get paid in it, you'd rather go and, you know, buy bread because it'll probably hold its value longer than the currency, right? So stability is what drives Bitcoin, and everything else will slowly disprove itself over time.
So in the talk, you quote an excerpt from Seyfried's book, where he mentions the simplicity of representing gold, like paper and accounting ways made it easier for microtransactions in gold. That's, I guess, true. But also this simplicity of representation made it easier to like break the link between gold and the currency. And it made it easier to later completely break the link by the central banks and governments all around the world. And since then, like for past 100 or 150 years in some countries, we actually didn't have the gold backing of the currencies anywhere in the world. So my question is, if the Lightning Network basically acts the same as like receipts acted for gold, like it makes Bitcoin much easier for microtransactions, it kind of changes the fundamental principles and economics of Bitcoin as well. So aren't you afraid it can kind of like break the link between like the fundamental principles of Bitcoin and how it's used? You know what I mean? Like for example, like
no, I got it.
Yeah,
no,
like,
I understand.
You pay for the volume, not for the.
Yeah. No, I understand the question. Yes, it's actually a very good question. I'll repeat the question. I don't know if the speakers came through. The question is, in my presentation, I talked about how silver to gold lost its usefulness as money because gold could be used as a micropayment with paper currencies in the advent of technology, but it did corrupt the system in that the government were able to sever the link of paper from gold. And is this a fear in the Bitcoin network with Lightning in a similar way? It's not a fear for me with Lightning. Let me comment on that real quick, but it is a concern in a different way. So Lightning is being built out with more privacy and more fungibility and insane decentralization. So I'm not expecting that to be the problem in like a Trojan horse sort of thing, right? Sure, electricity came in, modern banking came in, it made the use of gold easier, but then it also gave governments an opportunity to confiscate all the gold because it was sitting in banks and bank vaults. That is actually my concern as people use third-party Bitcoin banks. These are your Coinbases, your BitPays. The Bitcoin ETF is very concerning to me because if there is a Bitcoin ETF and Bitcoin is actually backing that Bitcoin ETF, that's a big chunk of Bitcoin that's going to be under the control of a US financial institution. It'll probably be US. And that's a big honeypot of Bitcoin that gets collected. Add to it Coinbase, add to it Fidelity that's going to be holding it on behalf of clients. And you have a similar situation to the early 19th century. Where gold gets concentrated. So Bitcoin is getting concentrated. That's a concern. Like if 40–50% of all the Bitcoin is now centrally located amongst 100 regulated financial institutions, with a single phone call, the government can confiscate 50 or 60% of all the Bitcoin. And that's a concern because now it's the 1933 problem all over again. If the people had the gold in their hands, it would have been very difficult to confiscate. So that it's not the Lightning Network that concerns me, it's the third-party Bitcoin banks that do. So yes, it's a concern. I'm hoping that this isn't happening until, I don't know, another 40–50 years. But yes, it's a concern.
Here. Could you imagine that in some extreme circumstances, some existential crisis to Bitcoin, there could be temporarily two different versions of Bitcoin? If it would not be clear which solution to take, it wouldn't be some bug where it's clear what's the right solution, but there would be two options. It's not clear which one is better. There are some trade-offs. Can you imagine that in this situation there would be temporarily two versions of Bitcoin?
Well, blocks get orphaned all the time, right? Like two blocks get found within microseconds of each other, and Bitcoin has a way of finding a path. Now, I don't see this happening without some kind of a bug. Now, there could be disagreements on the bug. That's what happened in 2013. If you review the March 2013 split of Bitcoin, it was a very minor bug that basically split the network, and it wasn't easy to decide which one. I think at this point, if this was to happen, it would have happened by now. So I don't think this is very likely that it would happen. I think it would only happen after a soft fork. Like if there is something unforeseen in a soft fork that splits the network, and even if it's not a bug, the core developers will instantly suggest which side is more technologically secure. Because if it's split, there had to be a reason for the split. Because if there is no reason for the split, then, I mean, miners just build on top of one chain or another. It's the longest chain wins. So you need a soft fork, and then there'll be two paths, exactly like what happened in 2013. And then the core developers immediately contacted as many miners as they could, and they explained to them which path is technologically safer. Now, the miners didn't have to choose that path that's technologically safer. They could have stuck on the other path, but most miners, most, not all, most miners are there to help facilitate the system. And they will listen to the core developers. There was a special case in that SegWit fork, which we could discuss.
Okay, sorry, I might not have been clear enough, but I mean, not a technological problem. It wouldn't be a technological problem. It would be an issue of, let's say, monetary policy. And it wouldn't be that a split happened and then we need to decide which one is technologically safer or something like that. But it would be deliberate choice by the state.
Well, no. But to change Bitcoin's monetary policy, you need a code change, which would be very, very debatable. And while that is also a concern, it's not a concern for me anytime soon. I mean, throughout history, inflation is always one, right? There's always this push to create inflation. Will Bitcoin's hard cap of 21 million Bitcoin last forever? The real answer is maybe, probably, right? Right now, we all value 21 million Bitcoin. What happens in 80 years? What happens when all of us are dead, right? What happens when the next, 2 generations of economists and people using Bitcoin, where the majority is convinced that 21 million Bitcoin is not enough, which may actually happen because Bitcoin can only be divided up to 8 decimal places. A few years ago, I thought, well, that could be changed with code. Why does Bitcoin have to divide to 8 decimal places? Why can't you just divide it further? But it's a computer science limit. It's not that easy. Now, within the Lightning Network, you can subdivide a Satoshi. But to close the channel, you need at least 1 Satoshi. A mining fee needs to be at least 1 Satoshi. Right now, we're paying a mining fee of Satoshis per byte. And that's the horrible debate over mining fees. Well, Bitcoin's fees are in Satoshis per byte. Bcash fees are in, their version of a Satoshi. I like to call it the VAR. VARs per byte, right? But 1 VAR is what? 97% cheaper than 1 Satoshi. So by default, your fees are 97% cheaper because the value of 1 unit is smaller, right? So it's really hard to subdivide a Bitcoin. So if 1 Bitcoin is worth a few $1 million, 1 Satoshi starts to become a little expensive here, right? So will there be a push in 50 years, in 60 years, if Bitcoin still exists and is thriving and has become the world reserve currency? Could there be an economic push to change its monetary policy to create inflation? I believe there will be, and I think it has a good chance of succeeding, but that's only like after I'm dead. Like, I'm not expecting it in my lifetime, but I can see that happening. I could.
We have a question online.
Oh, great.
This is the way how I show you the question.
All right. Let me grab this one real quick. Do you think that the associated control signal and payment function can make the automated manufacturing processes more efficient? I'm not sure how to answer that. All right, let me read it one more time and I'll think about it. Do you think that the associated control signal and payment function can make the automated manufacturing processes more efficient?
We'll ask him to clear it up.
Yeah, I don't. Does anyone understand the question? Sorry, I don't get it. Oh, we got a question there and a question up here.
To go back to the question about the concentration, don't you think that it was existing before, and don't you think that it still exists? And why do you think that it could be only the institutions which are is concentrated?
So the concentration, so the question was, why am I concerned about concentration of Bitcoin in the way that I described earlier? Because Bitcoin was very concentrated from the early days. Well, that was private. There's a difference between private and public. I trust, I know a lot of people disagree. I kind of trust the private sector more than I trust the public sector, okay? So I know a lot of people hate Google and they hate Facebook because they spy on you, but they spy on you for the benefits of the government because they make them, right? Google and Facebook, yes, they want to know everything you do, only to advertise to you better so they can make more money, right? That's their purpose. Google's and Facebook's corporate purpose to spy on you is not malicious. It's for efficiency and profit, but it's not malicious. That's different than how I see government's purpose for spying on you. I see that as significantly more malicious. Finding a way to tax you, finding a way to imprison you if they don't like your political stance. I mean, Facebook and Google, they couldn't care less what your politics are, right? Not for themselves, but other than them trying to get their candidate in place, right? So I don't have a problem with a private citizen having a lot of money. He earned it, right? Unless he printed it for himself or he got it through some form of, dishonest means, right? I have no problem with Bill Gates being rich. I have no problem with, founders of Apple being rich. They created a product people voluntarily paid for. I have zero problem with Jeff Bezos being the richest man in the world. Created a company, created a product that made people's lives better. The important thing is that these people do not have the ability to create more money for themselves because they have money. And this is the proof of stake problem. So I have no problem with Satoshi having 1 million coins or early Bitcoin adopters having a lot of coins because Bitcoin is not proof of stake. All they can do is spend that money. They also don't have the means to confiscate other people's money. And that's why concentration of Bitcoin in the hands of private citizens doesn't bother me. Also, Bitcoin is probably the most decentralized coin there is. If you look at any altcoin, it's way less distributed amongst early people.
Yes, it's still concentrated, I would say.
Yeah, but it's
we still have unstable.
Sure, it'll work.
It fluctuates less.
I wanna.
There's more distribution, but actually, you mentioned a timeline, which is like 50 years. I don't think this is very clear from your point of view. I mean, I would like to have more, according to the evolution of the distribution of this coin within the market, which is trackable, and your expertise, you have a better perception of the visualization of how it's going to be really well distributed. So the coin will be more stable, basically.
Well, yeah, but you can't force it, right? I mean, like, what do? Do you break Bitcoin's immutability by confiscating Satoshi's coins? That's another debate, right? This debate will happen eventually, right? I mean, I don't want to do that. Some people probably do. They either want to redistribute Satoshi's coins or they want to just burn them so nobody could touch them. I think that's a mistake. Now, when will it not be a mistake? Well, let's say in 10 to 20 years, if Bitcoin's encryption is being challenged and the rest of the world has had enough time, hey guys, over the next 3 years, you got to move your Bitcoin to a more secure wallet, a more secure, Bitcoin address, and then all of those that, all the Bitcoin that has never moved. Well, now the government has a way of breaking that and confiscating it. So that could be a do or die point, right? Then it's like, hey, we may have to burn those coins. Like, I don't know what those debates will be like in 10 to 20 years, right? Now, ideally, you don't want to do that. So there's no solution here, right? So there's no good solution. If you don't like the concentration, then the only way to fix it is to break Bitcoin's immutability, which is not gonna happen because that destroys the system. So it becomes which one is less likely to destroy the system. Today, you got to let it go. My concern right now is, again, concentration in entities that could be confiscated. I don't believe Satoshi's coins could be confiscated right now. Early Bitcoin adopters' coins can't be confiscated right now, not a concern. What concentration is a concern? BitMax's insurance-like fund, which now has over 10 or 20,000 Bitcoins, growing very, very quickly. That's a pool of Bitcoin that is confiscatable. You know, government shows up, arrests them all, and says, give them up or you'll never see daylight again, right? It's the pools of Bitcoin that are confiscatable by governments that worry me, not individual citizens.
And there was one more question.
Especially anonymous individual citizens. Well,
So what do you think? Two questions?
I'm good on.
Okay, so we go.
Thank you, Donald. I would like to ask you something maybe more a little for fun because we
Sure.
know that the opinion on Facebook Libra would actually be, but I'd like to hear you. What is your take on the Libra? Maybe I would say that first I admire Andreas Antonopoulos telling about Facebook Coin maybe 3-4 years ago. I remember that, and then it really happens that Facebook is creating this Libra, and now you've got the United States residents pondering about whether interfere or not. And I would like to hear your opinion on that. How it will probably, in your opinion, form the perception of people about the cryptocurrencies and what will happen to Bitcoin, whether there will be some interaction or people will be benefit from it?
Sure. So the question is basically my thoughts on the Libra coin. So I like to break down the Libra coin into 3 parts. Okay. One of them is, well, 2 of them are easy to explain, and the 3rd one becomes a long-winded economic discussion. So 3 parts of Libra coin are: Facebook has a very good, I don't want to say medium of exchange, a very good payment network, right? I mean, so many people have Facebook, and being able to send money from your Facebook account to your friend's Facebook account, just like you send a Facebook message, would be amazingly beneficial to the world, right? Especially if, let's say, Facebook was allowed in China or across the world, right? Now you can pay someone in China because you both have Facebook, and it's instant and it's easy. So Facebook crushes everyone as far as their ability of being a payment network. Now, it is absolutely impossible for Facebook to create a decentralized currency like Bitcoin. It's grossly obvious, right? Nothing about that paper had anything about decentralization. Like, they can call it whatever they like. It's not going to be a decentralized currency. Can't do it. They even have a less advantage than Monero and Litecoin and all the rest, right? So these 2 parts, Facebook, huge benefit. They have their payment network is infinitely better than Bitcoin's, right? Because a few billion people have it already or have Facebook. Can't create a decentralized, unconfiscatable, censorship-resistant value transfer that has a finite supply. Can't do it. Totally centralized. Now let's talk about this middle part. They decided to invent a new currency, but it's not really a new currency. It's a currency off of a basket of other stuff. And I want to say stuff because it's not clear what's in that basket. So they're actually competing with IMF's drawing rights. Like, IMF has a currency that's a basket of currencies, but it's not there for the retail public. It's only used between institutions and banks, like government institutions. So they're creating a private competitor to the government's version of the IMF currency drawing rights. What's going to be in that basket underlying Facebook's currency? Well, obviously, there's going to be fiat currencies. Will there be debt, public or private? We don't know. Will there be commodities like gold and silver? We don't know. Will there be Bitcoin in that basket? We don't know. Probably not, but we don't know, right? And the fact that Facebook decided to make this new currency based on a basket of currencies, and they calling it decentralized, governments have a big problem with it. They shouldn't, but they kind of do, though maybe they should, right? Like governments don't want private currencies. Governments don't want corporations to have more control. Governments still want to be in control, at least with the currency. So, and because Facebook is creating something totally centralized, governments can just bring them into the office and talk to them, right, about what they're actually building. So will Facebook currency benefit the world? Yes, it would, because it will be easy to transact between somebody in the Philippines and someone in America, right? Remittance becomes a breeze, unless their currency is not as stable as the US dollar. Because if their currency is not as stable as the US dollar, then what's the point? Someone has to take their US dollars, convert them into Facebook coin, send Facebook coin to the Philippines, and then if they can't use that Facebook coin in the Philippines, they now have to convert to the Philippine peso. It's probably not going to be cheaper than using Western Union, okay? With maybe a little bit cheaper, right? But not that much of an advantage. So the good news is for people in the Philippines, more and more things are online. And if this Facebook coin is viable, then other places online will accept it. So at least you'll be able to use it online, but it needs to be stable. If they can't make it close to stability as the US dollar, then there's no point. It has to be within 5% as stable as the US dollar. And I bet you the US dollar will be like 50, 60% of Libra coin, because they need it to be as stable as the dollar, because the dollar is the most stable currency you have across the world of other fiat currencies, right? If the currency they create is, less stable than the euro, because the dollar is more stable than the euro in general. If it's less stable than the euro, then why would people use it, right? It needs to be pretty close to stability to the US dollar, with other currencies fluctuating against it, and it can fluctuate a little bit against the dollar, but it has to be close. And then it can really benefit the world. It's not going to be private. It's not going to be censorship resistant. It's not going to be unconfiscatable. It won't have any of those properties. So it's not a competitor to Bitcoin. Will it help Bitcoin or hurt Bitcoin? I can make an argument in both directions. We'll see.
So, any more questions?
Oh, wait, you had a question?
Yeah.
Wait, we have one up here. He had a hand up earlier, right here. Yeah. And then we'll go there.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for your presentation. I have one or two questions. One is about the second layer of the scaling, and how is it impacting the decentralization? Because if the Lightning Network is still in its infancy, and it's quite easy to attack those nodes and trying to damage the name of the Bitcoin, and also to steal the money. If you will hack the server where the node is, then you are controlling the liquidity of that node, especially when there will be some big nodes and someone will hack it, and a lot of payments will go through. Isn't it something that?
Well, I'll answer it quick. I believe in my discussions with core developers who I trust. Now, Bitcoin network is supposed to be trustless. It's supposed to be decentralized, but I trust the randomized group of core developers. I've spoken to many of them. I find them to be incredibly smart, and I find them to be, in proper mental state that they believe that this needs to remain a decentralized currency. So I do trust the work the core developers do, the way I trust, nuclear scientists to build a nuclear reactor that's providing electricity for me to, not to explode. Now, I'd rather not get my energy from nuclear power plant, but it is pretty efficient until we find better ways. So, and in my discussions, it seems that the second layer, Lightning, should make it more decentralized, right? Like it should make it better. Right now, the system is still a little fragile, but it's getting better and better, and it should make it better, not worse. Like it should be, should be more private, more anonymous, more fungible, and more distributed, not less.
Okay, and my second question is about the decentralization that you were a lot of talking about here. That at the end, it's estimated something like 50 or 60% of the hashing power is in China.
Oh, those numbers are very old.
Yeah, but still, they are really big mining pools, and just one of the biggest mining pools are in China.
That's correct, but the pool is in China. It doesn't mean that the miners are in China, because you can connect to any pool that you like. I personally connect to Slush Pool, which is right here, right here from Prague, and you can connect to it from anywhere. So just because the mining pool is run by a Chinese company, it doesn't mean that that hash power is coming from China. China has went very aggressive against miners and everything Bitcoin. And I don't know what the latest numbers are on mining within the border of China, but I would be surprised if it's actually above 30%. Like I would be surprised because there's lots of good electricity that people are utilizing mining in Iceland because of the way they have geothermal power. Venezuela is becoming popular only because of free state electricity. The problem with Venezuela is how do you get miners in there? I mean, the challenge that Venezuela has is getting miners in and then protecting those miners from governments and other bad actors trying to attack you. And Uruguay, Paraguay, especially a lot of countries, people are getting very, very creative. There's lots of operations in the US as well if you can set up near hydroelectric dam. So I think mining is really getting spread out. I hear Mongolia is doing pretty well with what they're doing. So I really think mining is pretty decentralized. And let's say it is 60–70% in a single country. Well, what does that mean? They have no incentive to collude with each other, because if they 51% attack Bitcoin, like I explained earlier, you kill the system. There's no profit in it. You destroy it. Now, the government can show up and shut them down. The government can show up and try to run mining, but we saw how that worked out with oil in Venezuela. That's what happens when a government shows up and starts mining. So that's not going to work. So what happens if you shut it down? Like you find a way to shut down 60% of all Bitcoin hashing power. Okay, fine. So blocks will be a little slow. Transactions will be a little expensive till the difficulty resets. It's the same problem that you have. If the price of Bitcoin drops down to, let's say, $2,000 after the halving, 60–70% of world hashing power might actually come offline. Might. I don't think it will, but it could. And would that be a bad thing, right? Like I can make the case that if mining in the future is actually at a loss, if it's not profitable for you to mine, that mining could actually be more decentralized, okay? Like here's the thing, do you profit from paying your internet bill? No, you pay an internet bill to use the internet. You using the internet makes your life a lot more productive, and it allows you to make more money. It allows you to, live better. I can see a future where mining is just not profitable, but so many people are mining because Bitcoin is so important to them personally or their business. Just like you pay an internet bill to have internet, I am willing to run one miner and pay, you know, $20 or $30 a month or 40, whatever that miner is costing me. I'm willing to pay that bill to help decentralize and secure my life savings. And I think there'll be more than enough people willing to do that, more than enough companies willing to do that. The example that I usually give is Netflix. I'm sure there are countries in Africa, let's say, where Netflix has zero presence because of rampant credit card fraud. How can they fix that problem? Well, you have a TV, you display a QR code. Can't double spend Bitcoin, right? If they choose the fee. And all of a sudden, Netflix is making an extra $1 billion a year because they've entered markets they couldn't enter before, just because of Bitcoin. So isn't it worth a $200 million expense to run a mining operation so you can keep the other 800 million? Like, I can see a future where mining not being profitable isn't necessarily a bad thing. But it's a debatable statement. For now, it's not, for me, for now, it's not really a concern.
I just was thinking in 2016 and 2017, the hashing power in China was very concentrated. And,
oh, a little closer.
Okay, sorry. So I was thinking, you know, if it's still some concern or no, because I have no other information.
Right. At the height of Bitmain's reign, when they were $1 billion company providing most of the mining miners, they grew very big and very powerful, and they made very bad decisions. They made selfish decisions to control mining, control Bitcoin by going to bigger blocks, and it cost their CEO his job, and it probably destroyed their company. Their leading chip designer quit and is starting his own company. Lots of competition is coming in for chip manufacturing. It's a very competitive field, and we see what happens when a company makes bad decisions. I don't believe China is dominant in mining manufacturing, nor actual mining anymore. I think it's over.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question here and then in the back. And then probably that's it.
Thank you, John. How do you see the role of physical gold as a currency in the future?
Ooh, okay. So I definitely, the question was, how do I see the role of gold as a physical currency in the future? So I'm already witnessing the destruction of silver as a currency, right? Like I'm not sure what to do with all my silver coins. I mean, I envisioned silver going down. I thought there could be one more pump left. I'm like a Ripple bag holder holding on to my silver right now, hoping that there'll be some kind of crazy pump. But I'm pretty sure silver is going away. Gold is a little bit tricky because Bitcoin is still a little slow to adopt, right? Like, yes, we all use the internet, but man, I mean, I don't know how it is here in the Czech Republic, but I mean, I drive 1 hour, and America's big, right? Like, I know it'll probably, you can drive from one end of Czech Republic to the other end within a day, right? Half a day? 5 hours, one end to the other, right? Like, it'll take me 7 days of nonstop driving to get to California, right? Like, it's a big country. And I drive 2 hours outside of New York City and I have no internet, right? So it'll take a while for Bitcoin adoption, right? I mean, like, we still have internet issues, for God's sake, right? And so gold will still have a role. The question is, I personally believe that the US dollar will be around for at least another 7 to 10 years, right? Eventually it'll go away, but I don't see any issues with the US dollar. I actually see the US dollar appreciating. I don't see hyperinflation. I see it going up in value. But eventually, all global reserve currencies collapse, right? Like what, in the last 600 years, we had 6 of them, right? 100 years is about a lifespan of a world reserve currency. We don't know what's next. China, maybe, right? Anybody else? Probably not. Maybe Bitcoin, right? So the question is, when does that happen? When does that transition happen? Because if there isn't one, then gold could still play a role because of history, because of the history of gold. But the longer Bitcoin remains, the more confidence people get in Bitcoin, the way they keep getting more and more confidence in the internet. Confidence in the internet keeps growing, right? Each one of us trusts the internet a little more and more every day for its stability. It is getting better, right? I mean, 5G is coming. I mean, yes, they have their surveillance problems, but it'll be faster and it should be better. And so we'll see what happens. I still think gold will have a role to play. I definitely see gold go into a new all-time high, past $3,000. Even in a world without hyperinflation, right? I still see regular inflation catching up. Once FOMO, gold's price starts going up, people want to buy gold. I do see gold going to 5,000. It's possible that might be gold's last bubble. I think silver has had its last big bubble. I don't think silver will go above 50 other than a hyperinflation environment. I don't foresee a hyperinflation environment, but if there is a hyperinflation environment, right? And if US is hyperinflating, that means most fiat currencies are, right? I can foresee silver going up, but that means copper is going to go up and everything's going to go up, right? But under normal market conditions, I can see another big monetary pump in gold. Do I see the world going back to a gold standard? I don't. Do I see if there's a global fiat crisis and it happens after 2030, I can see Bitcoin being critical in helping the world move to a Bitcoin standard, but I don't see it this upcoming decade. Maybe a decade after. Lightning needs to be fully scalable, Bitcoin needs to be fully fungible, and confidence. Need one more, like your kids need to start having kids, right? Like you need one full generation. Bitcoin needs to be a good 20 years in so that there is, like, the new entrepreneurs are not older than Bitcoin. That's what you need, right? You need Bitcoin to be older than the next Zuckerberg, the next Jobs, the next Bill Gates, as they develop their product. You need Bitcoin to be older than them.
Thank you.
All right, got one more in the back there. Sounds like it's to challenge something I've said.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but maybe it might be part of kind of commentary and maybe even question. It was, we are in the Czech Republic, which is probably a very bad example of a communistic regime where we had a very nasty nationalization period where all fabrics and everything were nationalized. And you actually mentioned that China situation, and it reminded me what I would be expecting to happen. It would be really difficult. And I'm really happy that the Chinese problem is going a little bit away, because if what would I expect would be the worst case for Bitcoin, it wouldn't be that hard to imagine for us here in Czech Republic, because the Chinese government would not hesitate to go and sneakily nationalize those miners, take over and take in the 50% of the mining power before anyone knows it. And when they do actually have that power in their hands, they will not regulate it immediately. That's what I would be actually fearing. After that, then you actually realize you are running on the Bitcoin, which is 50% owned by the hash power of some Chinese totalitarian regime. Then we would face probably something like colleague actually mentioned, that would we split the chain and which chain we would follow? because that would be a horrible situation. And that's probably where I would see something you actually kind of mentioned, that you don't see it as possibly, you didn't see the incentives to do so, but I do so, because if that is communistic regime, then naturally there would be incentives to destroy the Bitcoin this way.
Sure. So the question, I don't know if the live stream heard it. The question revolved around the concept of what if China did sneakily took over all of those miners, and you have a state actor that is doing the majority of the mining. Well, mining is only part of the equation, right? You have miners, you have nodes, and the user-activated soft fork proved that the miners are not in control, the users are. And there's not that many nodes in China. Nodes are in Europe and the US mostly. And so nodes can choose not to accept those transactions with another user-activated soft fork. Now, the other part is, if a state actor happened to have 50% of mining in their country, and they took that over without the world noticing, what is their motivation for doing so is the big question, right? And is their motivation to destroy Bitcoin, or is their motivation to profit? If their motivation is to profit, then, well, thank God it's proof of work and not proof of stake. They have to keep competing. And then they're no different than a private entity mining. If their motivation is to destroy Bitcoin, well, that's very expensive and very inefficient, right, to do that. So it doesn't make sense. Not to mention that it's so hard to sneakily do something like that. It is.
In China.
Well, I'm sure the US government would know. There's enough spies out there everywhere, right? I'm sure if this was actually happening, and if China was doing something like this, a state government like the US would know. And now the US would have to make a decision. Well, do we want to compete with them for this or not, right? So, and now you can actually have countries competing with each other for Bitcoin mining, which is another possibility that the Bitcoin Standard and Saifedean, I believe he covered it. I'm not sure. Maybe he did it. Maybe it was in a presentation. But there could be a future where, governments are also competing for Bitcoin mining, because governments may want Bitcoin. They may need Bitcoin, right? Like eventually, some central banks might want to put Bitcoin in their reserves, right? And now, if a central bank, they can do, right? That's more of a sneaky part. Hey, you know what? If this Bitcoin thing actually succeeds as a decentralized world reserve currency, maybe it's better for us to have some now. So if some major central bank, I'm not talking about not necessarily the US, but because it would be hard to do it in secret. But let's say some central bank that you're not really thinking about, like Japan or something, or Australia, and they're like, hey, you know what? Let's slowly start buying Bitcoin for our reserves. And then another country finds out, and they're like, well, if they're doing it, maybe we should do it, but maybe we should also do it in secret, because we don't want to tell other people, because then they might do it. And now countries are competing against each other. And that's just more competition, and that slowly benefits Bitcoin. Again, we run into the concentration problem, where if the majority of the Bitcoin is held by central banks for their reserves, and in banks and back in ETF, and now 80% of all the Bitcoin is owned by the public sector, can they all collude and say, you know what, let's just rid the world of the Bitcoin standard, go back to fiat and inflation? Is that possible? It's possible. It's also hard to get the world to agree on stuff, because governments are kind of competing with each other. So, I mean, a lot of these are theoretical problems and very hypothetical. I don't think this is happening. I don't think they care enough about Bitcoin. I think they kind of care, like Trump tweeted about it the other day. Does he really care about Bitcoin? No. Why did Trump tweet about Bitcoin? He probably had too many people around him asking him dumb questions about it, right? So he's like, you know what, let me shut everybody up and tweet something out, right? And I'll be done with it. So like, I just don't think they care that much. I think the IRS and the tax authorities are starting to care, and we'll see where that goes.
Thank you. I think we are, fortunately, they don't care so much as they could. It would it could have been much worse if they did care when the Bitcoin was fragile.
Yeah, I mean, look, with every year, Bitcoin just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's going to be so hard to take it down. All right, I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Tom.
All right, let me take this off. Hope the audio and video went well. Wait, that is my line. This is the one I need to. There you go.
Okay. Cool.
Perfect. Let me turn off my live stream. All right, guys. Hey, thanks for watching on live. And probably do a stream tomorrow.